Let's go over a memory palace that I've created. It's going to be based off of clinical ASCVD, or also known as clinical atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, consisting of acute coronary syndrome within the past 12 months. There's myocardial infarction history, stable or unstable angina, revascularization, stroke, TIA, and peripheral artery disease. TIA is transient ischemic attack. It's a mini form. It's considered a mini stroke. But anyways, to memorize this, we have a memory palace. And so we will be looking into loci collection in the memory world Discord server. And there's a lot of different options over here. Okay, so what is going to be our thought process? This looks really nice actually. But let's pick one that I've used already. So this one is what I'm going to be using. And so thinking about thinking about clinical ASCVD, we want to memorize acute coronary syndrome, myocardial history. Okay, so let's see. So looking into this, right, we can think of this seems to be like in a spaceship of some sort. And so I'm thinking of the Ender's Game. So if you don't know the Ender's Game, let me go type up the character's name. Okay, so Ender's Game, right? It's going to show this guy. Okay, this is Ender, Ender Wiggins. Okay, Ender, he comes in to this room. All right, let's say he comes into his room and he has like an Iron Man suit on. Okay, and he's looking at this board right here. And it seems to be like A B C D E F A S C V D. So lots of different letters rearranged over here, and he's trying to just rearrange that. But suddenly he feels the need to clean up his suit. So his Iron Man suit, he has a core. Okay. And in the core, it seems to be pretty dirty. So he's going to the sink over here to clean up the core of his Iron Man suit. So core for coronary. Okay. So first we know a clinical ASCVD just because we're rearranging letters on that board. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but work with me here. So looking at clinical ASCVD, we have acute coronary syndrome because he's cleaning the core of his suit over here. But at the same time, I also want you to know that Petra is one of the Ender Games character who is considered to be a best friend of Ender, actually. I guess a very close friend at least. And so we can think of these two individuals as a cute couple. All right, so acute coronary syndrome. So just another way or another factor that can help us remember that this is acute coronary syndrome that is a part of clinical ASCVD. In order for you to be clinical ASCVD, you need to have at least one of these conditions. All right. So myocardial infarction history. So we saw that Petra is looking at this laptop. She's kind of working, but actually she's looking at some of the direct messaging from Ender, and Ender supposedly is messaging other females. And so she's like very, very stressed, and she's actually getting a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. And so she's having a heart attack right now while Ender is washing his core. So acute coronary syndrome. Petra's having a myocardial infarction. And so she kind of falls out of the chair and she starts to become unstable. Okay. And she's having like this intense chest pain. So chest pain is angina, all right, from the myocardial infarction. And so Ender is panicking. He's like, "Oh, what do I do?" And then he proceeds to pick her up and to throw her on top of this bed. Okay, and he's going to do a surgery, some sort of revascularizations of all of her arteries. So using special magic, like all of her, I guess, like he's opening up her chest and he's lifting up all of her arteries. This is just a fantasy world. This is not what actually happens with surgery, but let's say that he's like using magic to lift up all of her arteries out of her body and revascularizing all of it. So like maybe adding another layer for each artery. Again, I'm just making stuff up to make it as exaggerated as possible, or kind of an episodic memory rather. So revascularizing her arteries to make her feel better. Okay, and so after we revascularize her arteries, her wounds are healing. Okay, and then she wakes up. Ender says, "Hey, are you okay?" All right, and so she's like kind of crying and saying what happened, and as a result, Ender just strokes her head. Okay, just saying everything's gonna be okay. So stroke as in stroke, as in CVA. Okay, so I just want to mention that not all CVA is going to be clinical ASCVD. Hemorrhagic stroke is a form of CVA, and hemorrhagic stroke is actually not clinical ASCVD. I just want to let you know that that. But stroke, okay, is going to be a clinical ASCVD. Next up, we have TIA over here. I think that we can just align TIA with stroke, okay, because TIA is transient ischemic stroke, or sorry, transient ischemic attack, and it's basically a mini stroke, except that it's not a complete occlusion. At least I don't think it's a complete occlusion. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's TIA is simply a temporary blockage of blood flow to the brain. Okay, so just associate stroke and TIA together in this portion of the memory palace. But let's say that she does come down the bed, come down the ladder over here and gets on the floor. Okay, she starts to walk towards her laptop, but she starts to have calf pain. Okay, calf pain. And it's kind of like really, really intense every time she walks. And so we need to have some sort of supervised exercise program for her to get used to walking again. And this is going to be peripheral artery disease. As peripheral artery disease, typically presents with some form of calf pain. So that's how I would remember PAD. So we went through this whole memory palace right here. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but this is how I remember it based on this memory palace, an Ender Wiggins room in space. So clinical ASCVD with the ASCVD on this billboard or this board. We have acute coronary syndrome because these are acute couple, or rather, he is cleaning the core of his suit. And Petra here is having a myocardial infarction. Okay, myocardial infarction. Um, and then she's like falling down. She's unstable. All right. And by the way, this is Petra. By the way, I just want you to have at least a face association. So that is Petra, and we looked at Ender already. And so Petra's on the floor, has unstable angina, kind of spasming right now. And so as a result, Ender is picking her up, putting her on the bed for revascularizations of all of her arteries. Okay. And then, she's crying, and so he's stroking her head, saying everything's gonna be okay. Okay. And stroke and TIA, we're gonna say that, it's basically in the same list. All right. Mini stroke or stroke. And then as she goes down the ladder and goes towards her laptop to do her work, she has calf pain. And that's going to indicate peripheral artery disease. So that's all in the list. And these are all basically, you need to have at least one of this to have clinical ASCVD. All right, that's it. That's pretty much it. I hope this helps you form maybe your future memory palaces. Have a nice one.